Okay, so today I want to make a video talking about the next banned and restricted announcement, where there are going to be changes to historic and standard. Um, so yeah, that's what I want to do today. If you liked the video, if you enjoyed the content, please give it a like, subscribe, comment. Any or all of those things really help me just to know that people out there actually care what I have to say. Um, so, they're going to be making updates to the banned and restricted list, as well as a companion mechanic change. Um, this is definitely needed for obvious reasons. It's completely broken to have a guaranteed 8th card in hand if your deck just happens to meet the requirements that you can play from anywhere that can't be interacted with through discard or whatever, what have you. It's just there until you play it. It's really broken. So, glad to see that they're going to be making a fix on that. In this article, there were some suggestions from the pros. Let's give it a read here. First one, if you reveal a companion at the start of the game, draw one less card in your hand. That would... Oh, excuse me. That would be the least they could do, and I think it would be a good start. Companions are ridiculously broken in that regard. Like, there needs to be a trade-off, and I think having one less card in your hand is, like I said, the minimum, but also impactful enough to where we can see where the meta shifts to, because having one less card in your hand is pretty pivotal, because basically, in a normal deck, you're drawing 7 cards. 8 if you're going second, obviously. In a normal deck, you're drawing 7 cards, and it's 7 of those cards are from that deck. But with the companion mechanic, you're instead of drawing 7 cards from the deck, you're now drawing 6 cards. That screws up with your mana curve a little bit. So every deck post whatever this rule change is, if it's this where you start with 1 card less, like I said, minimum, bare minimum, to see what would happen to companion decks after that change. But if they did that and you had to start with 6 cards in hand, companion decks are going to have to adjust their mana base accordingly, and everyone's going to be running, I feel, everyone would need to be running like 1 to 2 mana more just to counteract that, because you're then drawing into those crucial lands slightly less frequently because of having that one less card. That's my opinion there. I think having that trade-off of that extra card and having it no longer be an extra card is pretty theoretically balanced in terms of, okay, if you're going to have a guaranteed card in hand or available to you, then that means you have to start with 1 card less in hand. And I think that'd be a good, reasonable start. Let's see, number 2. If you reveal a companion at the start of the game, draw 1 less card in your starting hand and add your companion to it. I don't think they'd go that far. I think they would do the first suggestion initially and see how the meta looked after that, because I think if they made it so that you drew 1 less card, that might be enough to take the power level down some. I'm going to get into specific hits later, and trust me, there's a couple of companions on there for the next banned list that I hope to see. But I don't think adding it to your hand is entirely necessary, because if it is vulnerable to hand disruption and companion decks are still relatively viable, it makes hand disruption that much more effective, that much more powerful. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right course of action, but again, we'll have to see. Let's see, I haven't read these other ones yet. If you reveal a companion at the start of the game, put a card of your choice on the bottom of the library, and then put companion card into your hand. I don't... I'm not sure that that's the right way to go either, because again, starting with 1, that still makes companions way too strong in my opinion, because if you start with a blanket 6 cards instead of 7 cards, instead of drawing 7 cards and being able to ditch the least useful to you, that's barely anything. You may as well be starting with 7 cards. Like, let's be real. That's so close in power level to original companion mechanic rules that it's almost not a change at all. But the start with one card less in hand is so far away from both the original rule and this suggestion that that would make a significant difference, I feel. Let's see what this one. The fourth one says, suggests that companions cripple sideboards. I don't think that's the way to go. I'm not sure about that. I feel like if you want to go that route, make it mandatory so that if your opponent does sideboard, they can no longer use the companion. Maybe. I'm not totally sure, but that doesn't sound like the good fix to me. Alright, so looking forward to see what they change with companion. Now let's get into what I'd like to see banned coming up. We're gonna go here to regular band talk first. Band talk and standard. Like I said, we already talked about the companions and the hopeful changes that'll be made. Of the companions, okay, Lurrus, just ban it. I don't care what they change to companion. It's not going to be enough to stop this stupid cat. This cat is a... the cat is a nightmare. But it seriously is. There's too much crap that protects it. There's too much stuff you can keep using over and over again with it. If you're playing control and they're like... not Grixis. What's the... I mean, you can Grixis, but... What's the... Rakdos. If you're Rakdos and you're running... who's the god? Not Uro, but the other one. Kroxa. If you're running Kroxa and you're running control, you're going to lose. Because every turn, unless you remove... Well, we'll get to removal in a minute, but one thing that's terrible about that is if you're running Kroxa with Lurrus, every turn you're just going to have to force them to discard. And if they're not emptying out their hand because they're trying to play control or mid-range, that's a massive advantage for you. You just do that every turn. The second thing, which is really the main thing, I've talked about this in my last video, but Lurrus just has so much going for it in terms of protecting the card. You've got normal protection that your deck could already offer, like you know, God's Willing as an example. But the recurrent permanent protection, like what is it? Alcid of Life's Bounty. It's just going to be able to protect it from whatever color. And then once you sacrifice the Life's Bounty, guess what? Next turn you play it again. And as long as you leave one mana open, it's protected. It's even protected against generic board wipes because of a card called Kaya's Ghost Form. Kaya's Ghost Form says, for 1 black, enchant creature or planeswalker when that permanent dies or is exiled. So you can exile it with the enchantment on. It will still bring it back. And guess what? You can keep playing that every turn. And last but not least, the original one that everyone went after, which was Call of the Death Dweller. Bring back, you know, up to 2 targets of 3 converted mana cost or less from your graveyard back to the field. Guess what? You lost the Lurrus. No problem. And it didn't have any of that protection. No problem. Just use the Call of the Death Dweller and just hope you have a 6th or 7th removal spell for it. It's just it's so much higher in power level than all of the other companions. It's absolutely nutty. Definitely Lurrus needs to get banned. Second contender for the chopping block, Yorion. I say this as a person who plays a Yorion deck. Yorion is definitely problematic. There's a chance that it could get banned. There's no way in hell Yorion gets banned and Lurrus doesn't. There's just no way. Yorion... I don't think Yorion is going to need banning, and here's why. If they adjust the companion mechanic correctly, it's going to... Like, if you start with only 6 cards in hand, again, that's going to massively affect how your deck is structured. And that's going to be especially... the decks that are going to feel that more so than others are the 80-card Yorion decks. Because instead of running 1 to 2 lands more to counteract that, oh, I'm only starting with 6 cards, you're going to need to maybe run 2 to 3 lands more. 3 to 4, like, you don't... They're going to need to figure their stuff out to see if they're like the power level is going to be quelled enough to where I think it won't be quite as big of an issue as it is right now. Again, I'm a little biased toward it, but I think the priority needs to be getting rid of this stupid cat. Yorion is definitely the second worst commander. There's no doubts about it. Obosh is pretty bad too. Mono red, I hate it, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. The rest of them really don't do anything. Garuda, you know, I'd classify him as like third or fourth worst because I've seen Garuda decks here and there. I was playing Historic ranked, and the last card he milled was an Ulamog. That was fun. But, you know, you see them around, but they're not as consistent as they used to be, so people are opting out of Garuda to play other decks. Now, if the correct things get hit, will people go to Garuda? Maybe a little more. You might see it a little more prevalent, but it's going to be mixed in the pool of possible decks that people are playing in Standard or Historic. So I don't think that the Garuda is to the point to where it needs a banning. It is problematic, but again, it's not consistent enough. It isn't A, seen consistently enough, and B, flat out not consistent enough to really be doing as much damage as it used to in the beginning of the season. Karuga is really only a problem if fire sticks around, and we'll get to that. I don't think they'd ban Karuga just to leave fires. But, again, if, say, theoretically Fire stays, I didn't want to get on the Fires tangent yet, but say theoretically Fire stays and the companion mechanic goes, start with one less card in your hand, you know, it's a companion deck that's going to have to deal with that handicap now, instead of just being a flat-out plus. You know, Umori's Umori. The rest of them are kind of eh. But like I said, the biggest offenders right now are Luris. God help us if he doesn't get banned in Historic and Standard. And Yorion, chance of ban, but I feel like they're going to wait and see how the meta adjusts before they decide if they want to axe Yorion or not. Now we're going to talk about non-companions. Cauldron Familiar. This dumb cat needs to go. Okay? It's so stupid how many times I have played opponents where, like, your chance of opening one of a 4 of in your deck is like 42% or something like that. And the chance of opening 2 of a certain card is, I'm not sure, 25. I don't know the exact number, so I'm not going to spit out numbers I know nothing about. But it's not 90% or 80% even. And I swear 80 to 90%, whenever I see this cat or the oven, they're always together. Ban cat. It's a time waster on Arena. It's a morale. I don't even know what to call it. It's the opposite of a morale boost. It's just people hate it. Get rid of it. I have Bullets to Citadel here because of the Jund sacrifice deck that's been rolling around, and I hate that. I haven't played it too often. One time it was at a very crucial point, and I lost. Whatever. He hit me for lethal and ended at 1 life. No big deal. That card is dumb. That deck is dumb. I don't think it should exist for a variety of reasons. But if you get rid of Cat, that deck's not nearly as powerful as it used to be. So get rid of Cat. Arena doesn't need this stupid Cat oven combo. Leave the oven because that you could actually maybe do things with in game, but the cat just has to go. None of this every turn bringing it back, hitting you for 1, gaining 1. It's so dumb, and it should have been banned when Eldraine came out. Let's talk a little bit about Mono Red. There are 3 problem cards in Mono Red: Champion, Anax, and Embercleave. Okay. Anax is a problem because if you play Embercleave, you just win. You get 2 extra devotion points, which means 2 extra power, 4 extra power when you count the Embercleave. Okay, so unless you have, you know, some sort of removal, that's game. The other thing that makes it a little problematic too is the reason that Mono Red Obosh runs the Anax is because it's a defense against board wipes. They run 4 Anaxes and 4 what's it called, Castle Embereth. So you get board wiped with Anax on the board, unless it's like Extinction Event, which, let's be real, 90% of the time in this format it's not going to be. You just got between 3 and 5 1/1 red tokens. Yeah, they're not going to hit for double, but guess what? They'll hit for double and triple with Castle Embereth and that artifact, the Heraldic Banner, when they just call red. So, should red not have a protection against board wipes? I'm not sure the answer is no, necessarily, but I do know it's a problem that gives mono red resiliency mono red shouldn't have. Okay, it should be blitz, and you either win or you don't win. That being said, I feel like, look, this is why I say one of these three things has to go, the Embercleave, the Anax, or the Fervent Champion. The reason I say one of these three things has to go is because Fervent Champion is probably the worst part of mono red, straight up, because nothing is worse than having a game where you go second or even first sometimes. Nothing, I mean, especially if you're going second, but nothing is worse than having a game where you just see Fervent Champion turn 1, and then you're just like, oh, does he have the second one? I wonder if he does. And boom, there's the other Fervent Champion. That's 4 damage on board. That's 5 damage turn 2, and then just 4 more every turn. It's just, with a first striker, 2 first strikers that can do 2 damage, that shouldn't exist in mono red. It just shouldn't. It shouldn't be allowed to like have the chance of happening. It's too much, and people will lose too often to it. Okay. But if you get rid of it, you kind of hurt knights, whether it's Mardu knights or Rakdos knights. I haven't really seen that, or Boros knights. You're gonna hit knights indirectly, and I'm not sure knights necessarily deserve that. But if you hit one of the other 2 main things, that's going to be enough to solve the mono-red power imbalance. And I think the correct call is probably Anax, because this is why mono-red Obosh is doing so well right now. It's the fact that Anax protects against control and board wipe. Unless it gets exiled, and let's be real, the main exile card, Elspeth Conquers Death, it's going to be so late in the game that unless you're going first and are able to control the board enough to where you can play Elspeth, like, in order for Elspeth to really be useful to you, you need to be going first. You need to have the board under control, and you probably need to have Teferi have bounced an Anax once already. And that's about the only time that you can get it to work. And even then, they might have a second Anax. So even then, it's like, well, that worked out fine. But the fact that it can protect against board wipes is not entirely healthy for the game. But I think if you get rid of Anax, that would probably solve the problem. Because, again, mono-red Obosh is the big threat right now. But, again, I'm not too sure on which of the 3 things to hit, because Embercleave is obviously not run a mono-red Obosh. It wouldn't do anything. So hitting Anax makes mono-red Obosh either work or not work, which is what mono-red has always done. But also, you still have the threat of the double Fervent. I'm not sure. I just know something needs to be done with mono-red. We'll see if anything is done. Growth Spiral. I have this in Wilderness Rec on this list because it's, again, one of those things where I'm not totally sure which should be getting hit, and I think it needs to be Growth Spiral. Ramp is just so strong right now, and it needs to be not this strong. Banning Growth Spiral in... By the way, I think my opinion on all this stuff is for historic and standard that they need to be banned, or whatever my opinion is. I don't know what I'm talking about it. But Growth Spiral definitely needs to not exist. There are plenty of other ramp cards to be running. Growth Spiral just makes Simic way too degenerate. And if you hit the growth spiral, you'll hit the consistency and the speed of Wilderness Reclamation to the point where it probably won't be a problem anymore. You can hit Wilderness Reclamation and then kill the deck, but it also doesn't. Half of the deck is ramp, so it doesn't. You fix one deck, but the rest of the Simic, or multicolored decks, including Simic, they still exist and they're still just as much of a problem. Like the Temur Elementals with the Ultimatum. Shit just needs to be slowed down, and Growth Spiral, I think, is the biggest offender in terms of why everything comes out too fast, especially if you're going second. Like, nothing's worse than seeing an opponent drop a 5th land when you've only been able to drop 2. Like, it's off the walls, overpowered, and no, something needs to get hit here. Fires of Invention. Again, I am a Fires player. If Fires got hit, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. As someone who runs Grixis Fires, which I might actually... I'll probably... excuse me. Still haven't slept yet. I will probably do a profile on later on. But for right now... right. What I was getting at was, if Fires goes, I wouldn't mind it too much in Historic. It would free up my Grixis deck to kind of... Since it would no longer be constrained by that kind of strategy, I feel like I could still make something of it. In terms of Standard, I don't know. I know a lot of people want to see it banned. It is very powerful. It's borderline overpowered. It might even be overpowered because, again, free casting, it's a problem. One of the reasons I'm not so sure Fires of Invention needs to be on the chopping block is because people were calling for it to be banned, when we were going into Theros block and going into the Ikoria block, because Fires just was still the prevalent top-tier deck, and it was for Ikoria for a while. But now it's not there anymore. It's being taken over by Lurrus decks and Yorion decks and just mono red Obosh. It's kind of been pushed. Yes, Yorion does run Fires, but also keep in mind the consistency would be hit depending on what they do with the mechanics, especially if they just ban Yorion. I feel like Fires can stay. That's one thing that I can say pretty confidently. If for some reason they decide to ban Yorion along with Lurrus, mind you, like if Yorion gets banned, Lurrus is for sure getting banned, because it's telling us kind of what they feel the biggest threats are in their power level. But if Yorion gets banned, Fires doesn't have to go. Like, Jeskai Fires has been going down in popularity enough to where I don't think it'll crop back up to be necessarily the #1 contender, especially whatever companion mechanic hit they do, because Jeskai Fires will want to run Karuga. Guaranteed. And again, those companion decks are going to have to fiddle with that new restriction or new handicap, and it will come back not quite as strong as it used to be. So that's my explanation for Fires. What do I think should happen with it if they don't hit Yorion? I'm not totally sure. Again, it can go, it can stay. I think there are bigger threats that have emerged over the last month or two than Fires. Is it a top contender? Yes. I don't know. That's all I got to say on that. Winota, 100%. Get rid of this dumb cunt. Historic, Naya, Winota, and Historic, awful to play against. Awful. Just completely stupid. They'll just run. They run Umori, and instead of instead of Neoform, they just run the Fauna Shaman. Pay 1, grab Winota, cast Winota. Standard, oh my god. 4-color Winota is so rampant, degenerate, and stupid. Consistently consistently you can throw out turn 3 Winota. Turn 4 at the latest, because you're running 8 Winotas. You're running 4 Winotas and 4 Neoforms. And for some reason the deck just continues to dominate and work, and it's so irritating. I went up against one, and this is in my Yorion deck I've actually changed it to where I have 8 board wipes. It still hit through all of them. The ones that I drew anyway, and I think I drew like 4. It's so degenerate and needs to absolutely be gone. Again, from Historic and from Standard. Gone. Zenith Flare. I don't care what they do with Luris, even if they ban him, which I hope they do. Zenith Flare is a problem. Get rid of this degenerate deck. No one wants to be on ladder and play Zenith Flare Roulette on if they draw, 0, 1, or 2. If they draw 0, obviously, if you can control the board state, you'll beat it. If they draw 1, high chance you'll lose. If they draw 2, guaranteed loss. Unless you're running a control deck with counterspells, there's nothing you can do against this. And it is a deck that does not make the game fun. Because, again, running into it on ladder, you're just playing roulette with if you're going to win with it or not. And it shouldn't exist because of that very fact. It shouldn't exist. Oh, God dang, sorry. I really need to sleep after this. It shouldn't exist when you're playing in ranked and you come across that Zenith Flare deck, the cycling deck. You shouldn't be forced to play that game of roulette where the deck does nothing but cycles into Zenith Flares. It's just, is this Zenith Flare? No, draw, pay 1, draw, pay 1, draw, pay 1, draw, pay 1, draw. It's so unbelievably consistent and resilient for doing nothing. I've never seen a deck do so much nothing than the cycle deck. Just please get rid of the Zenith Flare. It needs to go, period. Citadel and Embercleave, I've already talked about him. Agent, I know people don't like it. It is very degenerate. They may just end up hitting Agent, and that'd be fine. I wouldn't care. Like, I'm not going to riot and say, this card was fine, it was balanced, look at that casting cost. No, I'm not one of those people. The funny thing is that what broke Agent this format was just poor card design. Whoever designed Luca, just why you would not have included some kind of text that says on Luca non-token creature is beyond me, because designers should have realized, oh, someone can just run a deck with only a certain type of creature, have creature tokens, exile that, and then just 100% of the time hit that specific creature. They didn't think that was going to be a problem. In Modern, they didn't think people would build decks around Emrakul? Really? But, that's beside the point. Luca isn't... I mean, Luca is the problem, but it fetches the problem card. Agent really isn't seen too outside of Winota, so if Winota gets hit in both formats, no problem there. But Agent really doesn't see play in Historic outside of Winota. It definitely sees play in Standard, especially in Simic Ramp. But again, if certain ramp cards get hit, it becomes less of a threat. I'm on the fence about him. He can stay, he can go. I feel depending on the other hits, he can be a little more justified in staying. But if enough people want to see him gone, fine by me. That's pretty much all I have for this Standard environment, just kind of discussion about the upcoming list. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you liked the video. Leave a comment, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And I might be putting up a Historic Grixis deck profile before the list comes out. Probably. And then, of course, after the list comes out, I'll give my thoughts on what got hit, if I think it was enough, what they missed, and how stupid or smart their decisions are. 90% of it's stupid, I'm sure. So we'll see. Have a look out for that video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.